All right, we're on air. It is Thursday, November 19th. Nate is happily at the Nonprofit Developer Summit in downtown Oakland today, so he's not here. I'm manning the fort alone. Usually that means I just talk really fast and the meeting goes really quickly, so that should be fun. Let's see how this goes. General announcements. We have Dragon t-shirts and hoodies. If you would like one, you can go to backdropcms.org/contribute. And if you make a donation for $25, we'll mail you a t-shirt. If you make a donation for $50, we'll mail you a hoodie as a thank you gift. We have a lot of them, but we are planning on distributing them all year at camps and conferences. And they do tend to go fast when there are a lot of people around. So if you want yours, make sure you get it early, and we can send it off to you. There's plenty right now, but there might not be after the next event. Just fair warning. If you want to use PHP Storm, we have a bunch of licenses that are available for free to Backdrop CMS developers. So if you're a member of the Backdrop Contribute, you can send an email to info@backdropcms.org and we'll send you a license key. If you're not a member of the Contribute, but you do consider yourself a Backdrop developer, we can get you into the Contrib group, either if you're interested in co-maintaining a module, theme, or layout, or porting or creating one of your own. So most people who are developers usually have one of those things going on, and we can help get you through the process to get your code up there to be officially part of the community if you are interested. No important updates from the project management committee so far. Community growth. Since last week, we have 161 total projects for Backdrop CMS that's on GitHub, and that's only one new one since last week. I think everybody has had their hands full with the coming release of Drupal 8. So before I go any farther, I just want to say congratulations to all the people that worked so hard on getting Drupal 8 ready and getting it out the door. I'm excited to see it in the wild. So kudos to everyone involved. Also, on our community growth, we have 102 projects on backdropcms.org, which means those are projects that have official releases. The developer or maintainer of that project has given it an official release number, which means it's ready for use. So I think that's a pretty good stat. We've been around for under a year. We have over 100 contributed projects, which is pretty good. And if you look at the number of releases, so not just the number of projects, but how many of those projects have had more than one release, we actually have 128 releases, which means that 28 of our projects have been getting continued maintenance since the first release, which is pretty good, considering most of the projects that are up there are brand new. So I think that's a really good sign that our community is alive and maintaining itself, which is fantastic. Right now we have 42 people who are a part of the Backdrop Contrib group on GitHub. And I know there's a whole bunch of other people who are members of the community but haven't contributed modules, themes, or layouts. And so they're not on there just because they don't have code. That's totally fine. We love you anyway. We are going to make it so that people who don't contribute code can join the Backdrop community by signing up to the Backdrop website, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the agenda. Infrastructure tasks. We have been working on update checking because people keep asking like how many sites are running Backdrop right now. We are collecting a bunch of data from the status reports. Anyone who has update status, or I think it's called update manager module enabled, is reporting back to Backdrop. We just aren't properly counting those statistics to aggregate them per module. So there is an issue in the queue for project module. It's issue number 9. It has a pull request, it just needs some work to get that sorted out. Once we get all the numbers counting appropriately, then we will start publishing them on our website as well. In addition to tracking which projects are in use, we also want to track which specific sub-modules are in use. So like who's using Views versus Views UI. Right now that number is just a single number. It tracks by project. We want to get information on each specific sub-module too, so that in the future if we wanted to do something like remove the date repeat module from the date module, we'll actually have data on how many people are using date repeat, so we can figure out whether we should do that or not. That's currently, like spark lines and charts and graphs on usage over time. That's not something we have developed yet for Backdrop. So if anyone's interested in working on those things, they are specifically for project module, and you can work on them on GitHub in your standard project status, like the way you would work on any other project on GitHub, and then we can merge those into backdropcms.org as they become ready. We're also working on a project browser, and this is listed as an infrastructure task because not only will it provide a page on your own Backdrop website that'll let you browse modules, themes, and layouts that are available on backdropcms.org, but we also need to have the infrastructure set up on the Backdrop server to be able to deliver that data to your website as requested. And I think as we stand right now, we have the server up and running. We have the pull request against Backdrop, the project itself, which looks really good. And recently I added the 1.3 tag to that issue because I think it would be a great user experience improvement to get into the next minor version of Backdrop. So things are looking good. We could probably use some more testing on that just to make sure we've got it all working correctly, but I think that's on schedule. Drush for Backdrop. In the last 2 weeks, we've made a ton of progress on Drush. Mostly Nate has made a ton of progress on Drush. He took a look at what the blockers were with the current status of things and started filing pull requests against Drush, which he's gotten a bunch of feedback from Drush maintainers, and he's got changes merged into the latest version, which is Drush 8. That make Drush work for Backdrop. And right now he's got it running as a set of command files. So if you're running Backdrop and you want to include Drush support, you can just load those command files into your local Drush installation and it'll work. He's also noted that there is a bunch of work going on to make Drush less painful to install, which makes me really happy. The last time I had to work on Drush, I don't know how old the version of Drush that I was running before that was, but it was really easy to install and I got it going with no problem. The version that I had to install to do my work on Drush involved using Composer and trying to get Composer to update all of these really old versions of Drush, and it needed a bunch of other stuff, and it was just like, this is not easy anymore. I don't know what's going on, but it's ridiculous. Well, what the new version of Drush does is it contains its own packager so that you can download and install Drush just like you would download and install any other app or thing you want to install on your computer. It is not a command line tool. So if you're Composer friendly and you really want to use Composer, that's fine. You can do it that way. But if you are new and you just want to install a thing that gives you, you know, command line access to your Backdrop site, you can do that too. So I think there's a lot of really good-looking stuff coming in Drush 8. So it kind of makes me really excited to be working on the next version. And initially I was a little bit worried. I was like, Drush 8, that's the future. We want to work in the present. But the future is here. Drupal 8 is out. Drush 8 will be out any moment. And so I think having Backdrop support in that next version is also super fantastic. So woohoo! One caveat for Drush for Backdrop is that all of the commands that you're used to running in Drupal might not work. We've made it so that the most popular and most important ones will work, but there's also like a whitelist of commands that'll work. If you do a Drush status or a Drush, I suppose it'll tell you which commands will work and which ones won't, which is new. And Nate's also working on making that a little slicker for Drush for Drupal as well, so that if you're on Drupal 8, you can get commands that will let you do stuff like config sync. You also get those for Backdrop, but you won't get those on Drupal 7, obviously, because there's no config. So just making sure that the commands that work on the version of the software that you're running are the only ones you get access to is what we're working on now. So future of Drush looks very exciting. Okay, for our website, backdropcms.org, we are working on follow-up issues for modules, themes, and layouts. I was looking at the issue queue today, and there's been a bunch of really great feedback for things that people want. We know a lot of them already were in our design comps. We just couldn't build them because technical details needed to be built first on the implementation side. There's also a bunch of new suggestions there, which I was really excited to see, and I'd like to spend some work getting those ironed out. But what we're working on right now is building a user profile so that as people come to backdropcms.org, they can be able to register for the site. It'll make them feel like they're joining something, whereas right now we're like, be a part of Backdrop, but don't log into our website or create a user account. And it's a little bit weird. The only way to be a part of Backdrop is to join on GitHub, and GitHub is a very developer-focused place, and I think we need to make it more welcoming to people who aren't developers. So we're creating a user profile. During our design meeting today, we did kind of a review of Drupal.org in particular, but a bunch of other sites that have good user profile data, and trying to figure out what we wanted on Backdrop. And then we'll turn that list over to Darius, who's doing our mock-ups for what the user profile page should look like. So we might be collecting a lot more information than we'll be displaying right away, but at least we'll have an idea of what we'll want there long term, and we'll be able to build that out as we get people creating accounts, which is great. Once people log in, we also are going to want to allow them to do something with their account. So hopefully we'll be turning on logins around January 1st. I would love it if you could add submit a site for our gallery at that same time, but I'm not sure we'll get that done right away. But we would at least like people to be able to add like companies and organizations to give them credit, to list them in a service provider page, just stuff like that. So we'll see how much of the infrastructure stuff we can get done. We'll see how much of the design stuff we can get done. And we want to actually give people something to join and a place to go to find more information about the Backdrop community as a whole. So a lot of stuff coming soon. Other things we'd like to do is once people are signing into the website, we'd like them to be able to join their GitHub account with their Backdrop account, so you don't necessarily have to have two. So we'll try and set up some kind of single sign-on so that we can credit module maintainers, theme maintainers, layout maintainers for the work that they're doing on GitHub as well. We'd like to be able to open up access to edit those project pages directly on Backdrop CMS, so if you want to add a different photo than the one that appears in the preview.ping file of your layout or what have you, you should be able to do that on the website, although it will continue to pull in and update the README from GitHub. We'll figure out how we can augment that to make it a better experience for people. And we'd also like to add an events calendar and a job board and all of the great stuff that's worked for the Drupal community we'd like to do for our Backdrop community as well. So we'll take notes from the best on what worked. We'll also look at other communities and see if there are things that may be more relevant for Backdrop than the stuff that Drupal's doing, just so that we're not doing things that maybe don't apply to our audience, but just try and give people a sense of this is where stuff is happening, being on our website as well as on GitHub. In particular, we need to kind of re-examine our forum problem, which I think we'll probably do after we get some of these other things done, is that having a well-maintained forum, I think, has been something that's really important to the Drupal community. And when the forum stops being well-maintained, it starts to be a little bit of a problem. If you have enough people there, it's fine because they answer each other and point each other in the right direction. But this early in the game for us, we don't have a lot of people, and so we don't have a lot of resources to kind of put on these problems. So I think trying to figure out where to tell people to go to find the people we do have is going to be really important. So I think maybe sometime in January we'll revisit the forum thing and see if we can come up with a solution that not only is not a lot of work for us to implement, but more importantly, easy to make successful for people who are using it. So food for thought there. All right, let's talk about Backdrop, the project. Our next release, 1.2.3, is a bug fix release. I've been working on a client site for Backdrop, which has been making me so happy. It went live last week, and I fixed a bunch of bugs while I was building it. And it's the kind of thing where, you know, the client will send me and say, hey, this thing over here is acting funny, and I'll be like, you found another bug. So I'm really excited to get this next bug fix release of Backdrop out, because there's been a bunch of stuff that I've found and fixed recently, and I think the more people that start using it will, of course, keep finding more bugs, hopefully also keep fixing the more bugs, and just make the software better through actually using it. I don't think there's anything that's super urgent in that bug fix release. There's a bunch of really weird kind of edge casey things where it's like, oh, I put a block in a view with a contextual filter that had a default value that substituted the node title, and then the HTML entities appeared. I was like, I'm not sure how many people are actually doing that, but it should be fixed in case they do. So definitely not super urgent, but bugs that are fixed nonetheless. And I also think we should try and get all of the relevant patches from Drupal 7.4.0 into that release as well. Andy, I'm not sure how much time you have lately or if you've looked at that at all, but you are our most prolific Drupal 7 backport patch machine. So if you want to be interested, if you want to work on that, if you're interested at all, we would love to have you take a look at those cross ports. That issue is 1331 on GitHub if you're interested in looking at that. For our next minor release, Backdrop 1.3, that is a user experience and just general product polish release, where we know we've put a bunch of features in recently. It would be great if we could get those all kind of improved and spend an entire release working on making things make a little more sense. We've got a whole bunch of issues tagged with the 1.3 milestone if you want to take a look at what those are. Not all of them need to wait until 1.3 to get in. Obviously, as we get user experience changes in, especially little ones, we can push them. So fix it, put it in, fix it, put it in, fix it, put it in. Hopefully by the time 1.3 comes out, all of those issues will be fixed. Some of them are doozies. We have some issues in there like redo the field UI, which I know is going to be a lot of work. Because of the amount of work that is, I also don't want to add on top of that fix the views UI, which is also something we've been talking about. But I would love to see improved views UI. Something like field UI and views UI are already separate modules in Backdrop, so it's the kind of thing where if we developed something in contrib, it would be pretty easy to turn off the one that's in core, turn on the one that's in contrib, and give it a little test that way and see if it works as expected or better than expected, as we hope. So if those don't get into 1.3, there is still hope of getting them in at any point in the future, 1.4, 1.5, as needed. So hopefully we'll get them in on time, but still possible if not. All right, we also have, let's see, a handful of other issues we think are going to be great for 1.3. Layouts follow-up. Layout is a new module we put into Backdrop 1.0. We know it's not really perfect yet. We know there's some problems with it. We want to clean them up. Rich text editor, that's something that went into 1.2. Same thing. We put in a minimum viable product. There's a bunch of follow-up issues that'll make it much better. Cleaning up our admin pages so that they're all views. There's only one left. It's the comment listing. There are a couple of views bulk operations we need to get added before we can convert that into a view, but I would love to get that off our to-do list. It would be a better experience if people can change that using views UI just like all of the other listings. Getting our terminology correct, or at least consistent, would be really great. Edit and configure are two words that we kind of use interchangeably all over the UI. The plan is to make anything that is content say edit, and anything that is configuration say configure. But there is kind of a weird gray line between what's content and what's configuration. So there's a list there of, taxonomy is probably content, but in some websites it's kind of configuration. We're going to edit it because it's saved in the database. So that's kind of like where our line is. If it's content, it's in the database. It's configuration, it's in a config file. That's kind of the pattern we'll be using in Backdrop 1, so that you know if you configure something, that's something you can manage with configuration management. And in the future, if we end up deciding like menu links are configuration, but right now they're content, we'll change that link so that people who are administering their sites in Backdrop 2 will know if I hit configure, it'll map to a config file. So hopefully we'll get that cleaned up. Adding a notification icon. So this is something like when you run status report, you look at your status report, sometimes there will be something there like your version of jQuery is out of date or something, and you'll realize that that notification has been there for the last 6 months or whenever it was that you updated the module that needed the thing, and you didn't know because you didn't come to the status report. So having something in your toolbar, in your admin bar, like a little red icon or a little yellow one that says, hey, there's something you should look at here, and sit there until you've either dismissed it or solved the problem, I think will help people with that issue. We also have this problem where sometimes you install a module and instantly you'll get a message that tells you to configure it, but as soon as you leave that page, that message is gone and you can forget to configure it. So using the status report a little bit more like a notification system, I think is going to be great for user experience to get people to solve the issues that come up. And then long term, we can figure out like maybe we should make notifications smarter than just either messages that print on the screen or appear in your status report. but actually have like some kind of an inbox or I don't know, something else. So we've got two issues there. One of them is like just put a indicator in the admin bar, and that's instantly a bunch better than it is now. And then the other one is like solve the notification system problem, which is a little bigger, and maybe we can't get in by 1.3, but we can try if we want to. So there's an issue for that. That's number 639. Cleanup field UI we talked about already. It's going to be really hard. There's been a bunch of great work going in number 779. But yeah, we'll try and get that in by 1.3. All right, because 1.3 is a user experience release, we are also starting to think about the kinds of new features that we might want to add into 1.4. And so far we have two candidates for that. One of them is some kind of references module, which I think McCaffrey's been doing a ton of work on, which is great. It'll be hopefully code that looks a lot like the current references module, but will provide a field that works more like entity reference, where you can choose which thing you want to reference, whether it's a node or a user or a term initially, and then configure it the same way across all of those different entity types. And then the other thing that's on the list for getting added into 1.4 is some kind of redirect module. We want to put something equivalent to global redirect directly in core, but I think having like an administrative page that shows you all of your redirects and lets you set a canonical path for each item is something we're also really going to want. It's something that I think provides a lot of clarity into how the system actually works with its paths and that sort of thing. And I think will be really useful to get into core. It's something I use on every website. I'm not sure everybody who builds Drupal sites uses redirect module, but it is a really popular module. So I think it's definitely a candidate for core inclusion. It would be great if we could get some actual data on that, but 1.4 is a long way away. So we'll see. Maybe by then we will have some good data. All right. As you guys are building websites with Backdrop, also keep in mind what kind of things you find that you're putting on all of your websites. Most of us don't have a lot of websites to compare yet, but hopefully we will get there over time, and we will start trying to figure out like what are the missing what are the giant missing features? What are the things we really need in the 1.x cycle and try and get them in. If not, we can continue doing user experience releases, or we can start thinking about what are things that we need to change that we can't, that might require API changes, and start getting a future list of what's going to happen in Backdrop 2. There are a couple of issues that come up in the queue where someone asks for something and we just think about the scope of the change and go, it's not possible, and schedule it for 2.x. At some point, if we decide we're happy with Backdrop 1 as it is, we'll start looking at that list and say, okay, let's look at the stuff we've scheduled for the future. How important is that? When do we need to set a date for Backdrop 2? But I think right now we still have a bunch of stuff we want to fix in terms of user experience. We also have a bunch of features we want to add for 1.4. So we're most likely going to have 1.4 and a 1.5, and we'll see about maybe January next year being a Backdrop 2 time period. So plenty of time to work on Backdrop 1. Keep your thinking hats on. Add new features. All right. All of the time, as we're working on Backdrop, we will be looking at developer experience issues, and this is just what it feels like to write code for Backdrop, whether that code is CSS, HTML, JavaScript, or PHP, or SQL queries. If you find things that feel hard, weird, non-intuitive, confusing, document them, tag that issue on GitHub with DX, and we'll take a look at why that wasn't approachable enough and try and figure out how to solve it. In a lot of cases, we can simplify things with better documentation. We can provide wrapper functions that'll do things for us. But sometimes the problems are just so crazy, they go all the way to the core, and we need to think about how to change them. Right now, Backdrop is really similar to Drupal 7. That is because our target audience are people coming from Drupal 7. Drupal 8 is out. Our target audience of people coming from Drupal 7 is going to only get smaller over time, and so we need to start thinking about what it feels like to come to Backdrop from a different experience. So if you're a PHP developer or a WordPress developer, what are the hardest things for you to get into? Or if you're not a developer at all and you're just building a website and you want to tinker in the code, what is hard and confusing, and how can we make that easier to people? If our target audience is moving downstream from Drupal, we've got to make our code easier than what Drupal 7's code was like. So developer experience is something we are going to have to seriously consider and try and make some changes. So note things that are weird, and we will try and fix them. One issue at a time. Maybe 2, 3. We'll get them all eventually. Maybe. Probably not. Anyway, we usually spend a bunch of time working on Backdrop on Thursdays. Most of the activity happens in the GitHub issue queue, but we also hang out on IRC in the channel #Backdrop. We've started using Gitter, which is a lot like Slack, but uses your GitHub username, so you don't have to log into 2 different things, which I think so far has been pretty successful. It's a little confusing trying to figure out like which channel to join. Right now, there is a Backdrop-issues channel. We basically got one channel for every repository on GitHub. The Backdrop Issues repository is a public repository that anyone can contribute to, and so the Backdrop Issues Gitter channel is something that anybody can join. And so I think that's the primary one we should use. There is also a Gitter channel for Backdrop. There's also a Gitter channel for Backdrop Contrib. Both of those are like closed groups, so it's a little weird to be communicating in there. So I think we should try and use Backdrop Issues as much as possible. I spent some time trying to figure out how to make the Contrib group public, but it looks like it's tied to the Contrib project, which is not public. So I guess, you know, chat wherever you guys feel most comfortable. We'll keep test driving Gitter and see how it goes. We also have Reddit, reddit.com/r/backdrop. If you are not a Git person and want to find a more forum-like place to talk, that's a place to do it. And then we will start, you know, in January, do a kind of a 1-year evaluation of like how has it felt to be on Reddit, how has it felt to be on IRC, are the tools we're using the right tools for our community, and do a little evaluation and see if we should move any of that onto backdropcms.org, and if so, how much work is involved in doing so. So yeah, keep in mind problems you have and we can discuss. Upcoming events. It is the end of the year, and so we're about to enter holiday seasons, and people are doing a bunch of traveling and not doing a lot of backdropping. This week we do have the Nonprofit Developer Conference here that Neat is attending today, and I'll attend tomorrow. Next week, here in Oakland, there is an Oakland 2.0 like tech night meet and greet we're going to go to. So I think kind of getting out of the Drupal world and into the kind of larger web world is going to be good. So that's what we're trying to do while there's no Drupal events happening. But starting early next year, Sand Camp, the San Diego Drupal Camp, February 25th through 27th, has invited us to come and do a training. So we're going to do another Backdrop training. It'll probably be a full-day event where in the morning we'll do some kind of very intro, like how to build a basic site stuff, and then in the afternoon we'll get into a little bit of theming. So that should be really fun. I'm excited about working on that with Darius. He did one last year with a half day. This year we're going to add onto it and make it a full day. It'll be great. And then Drupal Camp Utah, which is March 4th through 5th. If you don't like sand and prefer snow, you can head to Utah. They're looking for speakers to talk about Backdrop in particular. They also have some perks where if your company sends you, your company will get sponsorship recognition on the website. Yeah, skiing is going to be great. Drupal Camp Chicago is also March 19th through 22nd, so if you like cold but don't like skiing, there's another option where you can go to Chicago and hang out with those kids. They're a really great group of people. They've been really open to hearing about and working with Backdrop in addition to Drupal, so that's a good place to go as well. That's all I have on the event calendar so far. Hopefully we'll get all these put on backdropcms.org soon, but there is a Google iCal feed which you can find on the backdropcms.org/contribute page if you want to follow those on the calendar. Let's see. I think that's it. Is there anything? Oh, I saw your comment, Andy, but I didn't have time to read it because I was talking too quickly. Let's see. A deeper FAQ. Yeah, I don't know how to aggregate an FAQ thing. I mean, I feel like if we set up something, so this is how to solve our forum problem. Um, I feel like if we set up something that was kind of like a forum, but maybe we change the fields to be more like it is on Stack Exchange. So it's like ask a question, get an answer, something like that. That might be a good way to do it, because then we could kind of curate those and say, here are the questions that were frequently asked, and make a kind of a list of the top questions, or have some kind of thumbs up thing. I don't know. It's a big project to try and figure out how to build a forum that's going to work for this community, but I think it is something we are going to need to address. Having a place for new people to get answers is going to be important, whether it ends up being IRC or what's the other one called, Stack Exchange or something. I'm not going to set up a forum with lorem ipsum text in it, if that's what you're talking about. What do you mean by dummy users? Oh, real answers with staged questions. Yeah, I think it would also be good to get real questions too, though. I mean, I think we could definitely seed a forum with, like, we know you're going to ask these questions because we've already heard them 100 times. But yeah, I definitely think, like, there are going to be questions coming from people with experiences that we don't know, and making sure that those people can get answers as well. Yeah, how to, I think, is going to be really, so this is kind of training, right? Like, this is beyond just questions, but like how to tutorial stuff, where it's like, how do you build a whatever? I spend most of my days Googling for those things for Drupal, where it's like, oh, I'm trying to do this crazy thing, whatever. And because Drupal's been around for 15 years, you can find that just by Googling it. It's going to be a long time before Backdrop's in that same position. But yeah, I definitely think there are a bunch of really common use cases that we can tackle ahead of time. I don't know if that should live on API, or if we should have like a howto.backdropcms.org where anyone can post whatever they want, or if we should try and do some like aggregator style thing where if you have your own blog, you can post it and we can pull it in. There's lots of ways to solve this problem, and I don't know what the right one is, but I do think these are good suggestions, Andy, and we should keep thinking about how to solve that problem. And we can definitely create up some fake people if you don't want to ask the questions yourself, or we don't have anyone who actually wants to ask them. We can have anyone we want ask the question.
Backdrop sock puppet.
Yeah, a dragon.
Yeah.
Backdrop the dragon. Drop the dragon asks, but how do you build a blog? But how do you build a forum? Okay. I think that's a great idea. I would love to see some kind of curated, like, here are how-to things. I just don't know where those would live. I mean, I also don't know who we're going to get to create them. I mean, anyone could make, like, everybody's made a blog, but they're all kind of a little different. So kind of having the aggregator approach of, like, write it yourself and we pull it in is good. But YouTube channel, that's a great idea. So many good ideas, not enough time. Okay, well, I think these are fantastic ideas. Can we write them down somewhere that's not in the Google chat? So we're gonna lose them. We're never gonna. I'll just copy and paste them into the meeting notes, so at the bottom, and then that way we can refer back to it later. We just have to remember we talked about it on November 19th. Are there any other questions and comments, or anything we should talk about today in this meeting? Nope. All right. Well,
should we mention anything because it's Drupal 8 release day? I mean, this is
yes.
Our fork source has now forked.
Drupal has forked itself, you guys. It's the day. Yeah, I mean, I interrupted myself earlier just to say, and it's probably good to do it again. Congratulations to all of the amazing people who spent time working on producing Drupal 8. It's been 5 years in the making. It is a massive undertaking, and I'm really glad that it is out. I think it'll be great to, for all the people who've been feeling a little burnout on it not coming out. It's out now. That's going to be a huge relief. Companies who were worried about upgrading are now going to be able to start looking at, can I upgrade my site? There's been a bunch of really great work about tools that let you see if all of your modules are ready yet or not. Hopefully it'll be much less in the dark kind of transition than it was to Drupal 7. I think the community has learned a lot from mistakes in the past, which is great. I am excited to have continued collaboration between Backdrop and Drupal, both in security issues, user experience. There's so much stuff that we can do together that will make both projects better. So yes, hooray, Drupal 8 is out. I'm going to Drupal 8 release party tonight in San Francisco. I hope everybody else has something to go to, either virtually, if not in person. But yeah, it's been a long time coming, and I hope that I've seen Twitter has been all ablaze today. Everyone's really excited. So, hooray.
Yeah. There are actually a couple of things I've noticed in sort of the lead up to the Drupal 8 release that reflect onto us. Well, one is that they've switched over to the semantic versioning model, for the same reasons that Backdrop did. So, and are talking about sort of maintaining it ongoing and not holding up features for Big Bang. I was listening to a podcast from Dries, this morning, where he was talking about that Big Bang, only add features every 5 years is not really that sustainable a model, which I know is close to all of our hearts. And the other thing actually came from Dries, and this is the last one that I was going to throw in, is I heard WebCheck quoting Dries, talking about the decision to go with Drupal 8, and hearing one step away, come from Dries saying well, they had this point where Drupal 7 had become more complicated than it needed to be, and they had to choose one or the other. They had to either embrace this extra features and do that, or simplify it. And he said, well, so we took the embrace the complicated features fork, and it strikes me that we're the other fork that Dries talked about. It seems to validate the whole concept. So that's just thoughts Drupal 8 that jumped out at me.
Yeah, I think that all those things are right. I mean, I feel like semantic versioning is something that the Drupal community had been talking about long before Backdrop was an idea in any of our minds. And it's definitely something that I think Drupal 7 and the really low release cycle of Drupal 8, or really slow, kind of pointed as being something that needed to be solved. And the fact that Drupal 8 is adopting it, same reasons Backdrop is adopting it, is fantastic. I think that semantic versioning will work really differently for the two projects. I mean, for us, it's more about scheduling a release and then working to get, whatever it is we want in that release, and then the bug fix release is just like anything that comes in between. Whereas with Drupal 8, they're not scheduling the releases in the same way. They're not scheduling features for releases. They're scheduling the releases. But it'll be interesting to see if there's anything that they're doing that we can learn from, and vice versa, in terms of how the two projects embrace the semantic versioning philosophy differently, which I think will be fun. And yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like that, there are a whole bunch of people who want the crazy feature-rich Drupal 8 system. Most of my clients are not those people, and so I am really happy that we have another option for the small companies that are perfectly happy with their Drupal 7 site, or who were perfectly happy with their Drupal 6 site, right? And they didn't need any more features, and they got them anyway. Now it's look, you can have the smaller, lighter weight software option that is still, you can still upgrade to it, you can still have all of the stuff you had in Drupal 7. You got to do a little work to get it there, but less than you would if you went to Drupal 8. And I think that's kind of the whole point, is letting people have options, letting everybody choose the tool that's right for them, letting developers choose the tool they want to work on. I just recently got to this point where one of my clients is like, we want a Drupal 8 site, and I'm like, no thank you. And they were like, huh, really? And I was like, yeah. I don't think that's going to make me happy. I'm going to find you a company to do that, and I'm going to keep doing my thing. And it was great to be like, as a developer, I can choose to do the thing that makes me happy, which is fantastic. I hope everybody else gets that same, has that same kind of good place to be in where you don't have to do what you don't want to do because you can choose to do the things you do want to do. And for some people, that would be like, finally, I get to work with, object-oriented code and Drupal 8. It uses all this stuff I've wanted to learn for forever, like Twig or whatever it is. And they can make that choice. They don't have to be stuck doing something they don't want to do. But we'll see. Some people have jobs, and they have to do what their boss tells them to. But I don't know. We'll see. It's an adventure. And it starts today. Yeah, so I feel like in terms of Backdrop success, we have, starting now-ish, people are going to start comparing things, and people are going to, I think the momentum will start now-ish, which will be good. I feel like for the last year, it's been like trying to get ourselves ready for today. And now it's like, okay, today's here. Let's see what happens. Yeah. So, all right. Let's see. More comments from Andy I've missed before. I'm interested to see the theming environment grow as Backdrop sites will use Backdrop theming, but Drupal 8 will probably be half headless. Just fun to watch. Yeah, I actually have wondered about that too. Like, there's been a lot of headless Drupal stuff happening. I mean, even since Drupal 6, just using views, right, to generate your data and then writing your own stuff on top of it for the front end. But there is like a significant cost to using. You're basically building two websites. You've got a back-end website, you've got a front-end website. And that's something not everyone can afford to do. I think a lot of the people who are in the position of using Drupal 8 will be able to do that. I think that might change the way front-end development works a lot in Drupal 8. But I also think, like, hopefully, all of the work that we did on Twig will make using the existing front end more attractive to people so that there won't be like, ugh, I don't want to use that. I want to write my own fancy, clean, whatever. Like, hopefully people will be like, ooh, I'm excited to play with Twig and I want to actually work with what's there. That was at least my goal for Drupal 8. We'll see. I also think you're completely right that most of the people who are in the market for Backdrop sites probably either won't want to do a headless situation or can't afford to, or have never heard of it and don't care. They just need a website kind of thing. That's most of my clients are like, I just need a website. I don't really care how you do it. Just, make me a website. And I think that will change the way people work with Backdrop's front end too, in that we need to make it easier to just make it pretty. And I know, Wes, you and I have a Google Doc we've been working on with a bunch of weird things that came up. I've been kind of creating my own list of weird things that happened and working on my own site, and especially around like CSS identifiers and like where the classes get added to things. Things a little weird because we've got this hybrid of like blocks and panels going on. Like the CSS identifiers come out in funny places and you can't target things exactly how you want. But I think there's definitely room for improvement in both. I am really interested to see where people take it. Like having people who don't have any Drupal experience come to Backdrop and say, this is what I find weird. I think it's going to be super refreshing to us because we don't really know. I mean, we kind of know because we know what people found weird about Drupal, but it's going to be a different thing. So, yeah, I can't wait to see what Kinshrim produces. Mm-hmm. Anything else? No? Okay. We have a nice long meeting today, guys. Thanks for coming. I will see you guys in the GitHub queue. I'm going to spend some time working on the user profile stuff. So if any of you have user accounts on backdropcms.org, if you want to log in later today, tomorrow, I'll post something in IRC and Gitter when it's ready. But I would love to get some alpha users on there if you're up for that. Okay. Maybe. Okay. All right. Well, I will see you guys online. Thanks all for joining the meeting, and we'll talk again next week.